The apartment building on Ashford Street was the kind of place most people overlooked. Its bricks were chipped, its staircases smelled faintly of damp plaster, and its hallways carried the echo of footsteps long after a person had passed. The residents kept to themselves. Doors closed quickly. Conversations ended abruptly when strangers walked by, and laughter was rare, if ever heard at all. It was not a place people moved into willingly, but rather somewhere they ended up when other options were gone. Laura Weaver arrived there after the collapse of her marriage. At 39, with her savings drained and her patience stretched thin, she signed the lease for Unit 6B without even inspecting it properly. The landlord, a man with yellowed teeth and eyes that never quite met hers, handed her the keys with unsettling speed. The first few nights were uneventful, though the silence was heavy. The walls were thin, and yet Laura rarely heard her neighbors. Occasionally faint shuffling crept through the vents at night. But when she asked around the next morning, the people she passed in the stairwell, tight-lipped women, tired men. An old man with trembling hands only glanced at her briefly before turning away. It wasn't until she met the woman from Unit 6C that things began to unravel. Her name was Evelyn, mid-40s, pale, with dark circles under her eyes and a voice that carried a sharp edge. She invited Laura in for tea one evening. Though the apartment mirrored Laura's in layout, it felt different: curtains drawn, mirrors covered, and a persistent smell of mildew. Evelyn didn't ask about Laura's life, didn't pry into her recent divorce. Instead, she leaned close and whispered, "Have you seen it yet?" Laura laughed awkwardly, assuming Evelyn was joking, but Evelyn's expression never changed. "The building isn't right. It keeps something inside it. Takes people." The hallway outside her apartment stretched longer on some nights, forcing her to walk farther than she remembered to reach the stairs. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror sometimes seemed a fraction too slow, her mouth closing after she had already stopped speaking. She heard whispers through the walls, though no one admitted to making them. One night, returning from work past midnight, she saw Evelyn standing motionless at the end of the hall. Her face was tilted upward, as though listening to something only she could hear. When Laura called her name, Evelyn turned, but her eyes didn't seem to recognize her. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. Then she simply walked into her apartment and closed the door. The following day, Evelyn was gone. Her apartment was stripped bare, no furniture, no clothes, nothing. The landlord claimed she had moved out in the night. None of the neighbors acknowledged her existence. When Laura mentioned Evelyn's name, they stared blankly, as though she were speaking of someone who had never lived there. Laura began spiraling. She searched for traces of Evelyn, scouring the building records, pestering the landlord, even calling the police. But there was no lease for Unit 6C, no tenant registered under Evelyn's name. According to the official records, Unit 6C had been vacant for years. Sleep abandoned her. She began hearing footsteps pacing her ceiling at night, though she lived on the top floor. Her lights flickered constantly, and every time she stood in her hallway, she felt as though someone stood directly behind her, waiting for her to turn. She began writing everything down, keeping a meticulous journal of times, dates, sounds, smells, anything to ground herself against the growing sense that she was dissolving into something she couldn't fight. Then she started seeing Evelyn again. It was never direct. Sometimes a reflection in the stairwell window, a pale face watching her climb the steps. Sometimes a figure disappearing around the corner as Laura turned her head. Once, in the middle of the night, she awoke to find Evelyn standing at the foot of her bed, eyes wide, lips trembling, whispering a single word Laura couldn't understand. By the time she switched on her lamp, the room was empty. Her journal entries grew frantic, her handwriting jagged. She wrote of nights where the hallway outside stretched endlessly, doors multiplying until she couldn't remember which one was hers. She described hearing her own voice whispering to her through the vents. She confessed that sometimes, when she looked in the mirror, she feared the reflection staring back was not hers at all. 2 weeks after Evelyn vanished, Laura herself disappeared. The landlord found her apartment unlocked, her belongings untouched. On the kitchen table lay her journal, open to the last entry. The page was smeared, the words messy and unfinished. I hear her every night now. She's closer. When I close my eyes, I think she's behind me. I don't know if I'm writing this anymore or if... The rest of the page was blank. Unit 6B remains unoccupied. The landlord claims no one wants to rent it, though he never explains why. The residents continue to keep to themselves, faces pale and eyes avoiding contact. If you ask them about Laura or Evelyn, they will only shake their heads. And sometimes, if you listen long enough in the stairwell, you can hear 2 sets of voices whispering through the walls. One frantic, the other patient, both waiting.